Right now, somewhere in the world, there's an American citizen who has absolutely no clue they might already be on a path that could cost them their U.S. passport forever. They think their citizenship is permanent, rock solid, guaranteed for life. But here's the reality, and it's far more complicated than most people understand. Under U.S. law, there are real, legal, and completely enforceable ways a person can lose American citizenship, even after holding it for decades. And the worst part? Many people don't discover this until it's already too late. Picture this. You're living abroad, making what seems like a perfectly harmless decision. Maybe you're taking a job, joining a program, signing an oath. Then later, you find out that single action put your citizenship at risk. Imagine believing you're protected by the Constitution, only to learn that your own choices can undo that protection. This isn't fear-mongering. This isn't wild speculation. This is grounded in actual U.S. law that exists right now, in February 2026. Today, you're going to learn about 7 shocking but completely legal reasons someone can lose U.S. citizenship. Some of them are obvious, others will genuinely surprise you, and a few might make you completely rethink decisions you've already made or are planning to make. If you're already a U.S. citizen, this information could help you avoid a life-changing mistake. And if you're a green card holder working towards citizenship, understanding these rules is just as critical. Hey, I'm Michael from Michael Visa Guide. If you care about your immigration status, your legal future, and your rights in the United States, you're in exactly the right place. Every single day, I break down complex immigration and citizenship laws into clear, simple, real-world information so ordinary people can understand rules that often feel overwhelming and confusing. Before we jump directly into the 7 reasons, there's something extremely important we need to understand first. Not all citizenship loss happens the same way. Under U.S. law, there are actually 2 completely different legal paths through which someone can lose American citizenship. The first path is called denaturalization. This applies only to people who became citizens through the naturalization process. Denaturalization happens when the government proves in court that a person obtained citizenship illegally, usually because of fraud, lying on an application, or hiding critical information during the immigration process. But that's not what we're focusing on today. The second path is something called expatriation, also known as loss of nationality. Expatriation is very different. Instead of the government taking citizenship away because of fraud, expatriation usually happens because of voluntary actions taken by the citizen themselves. In other words, citizenship can be lost not because the government decided to punish you, but because of choices you personally made. The legal foundation for all of this comes from a federal law called the Immigration and Nationality Act, specifically Section 349. But here's the most critical point of this entire video. Under modern constitutional law, American citizenship cannot simply be taken away without your consent. The U.S. Supreme Court has ruled that the government must prove a person intended to give up their citizenship. Intent is everything. That single word, intent, is the key that unlocks this entire topic. Performing one of the acts on the list is not automatically enough. The government must also show that you did it with the purpose of relinquishing your U.S. nationality. Now let's begin with the first shocking reason someone can lose U.S. citizenship. A U.S. citizen can lose their citizenship by voluntarily obtaining naturalization in a foreign country. In simple terms, if you're already an American and you later apply to become a citizen of another nation, that act can put your U.S. citizenship at risk. But this is where many people get confused. Just having dual citizenship does not automatically cause a problem. Millions of Americans legally hold 2 passports. Being born with citizenship in another country or inheriting it through parents is completely fine. What matters here is voluntary naturalization as an adult. However, once again, intent plays the central role. Under current State Department policy, the government does not assume that a person who naturalizes abroad wants to give up their American citizenship. In fact, the default assumption is usually the opposite. So when does this become dangerous? It becomes dangerous when the circumstances show that the individual clearly meant to abandon their U.S. nationality. For example, if someone applies for citizenship in another country and during that process makes statements rejecting the United States or declaring that they no longer consider themselves American, that can be used as evidence of intent. On the other hand, if someone becomes a Canadian or British or Australian citizen simply for practical reasons, like easier travel, better job opportunities, or the ability to own property, and they continue to live as an American, keep their U.S. passport, pay U.S. taxes, and maintain ties to the United States, then there's usually no issue at all. The second reason someone can lose U.S. citizenship is taking an oath of allegiance to a foreign country. On the surface, this might sound extreme, but in reality, many countries require some form of oath or declaration when granting citizenship, government positions, or even certain professional licenses. Not every foreign oath is treated the same under U.S. law. For example, if a dual citizen takes a routine citizenship oath in another country as part of a standard naturalization ceremony, and that oath is mainly symbolic or administrative, the U.S. government usually does not view that as an attempt to abandon American citizenship. But imagine a very different scenario. Suppose a U.S. citizen takes an oath that explicitly says, "I renounce all previous allegiances, including allegiance to the United States of America." Suppose they make public statements declaring that they no longer consider themselves American. In that case, the government may conclude that the oath was not just a formality, but a deliberate step toward giving up American citizenship. The State Department looks at the totality of circumstances in each individual case. They examine the exact wording of the oath, the context in which it was taken, and the behavior of the person afterward. Two people can take very similar oaths and end up with completely different legal outcomes simply because their intentions were different. Now let's move to the third reason. Serving in the armed forces of a foreign country can also lead to loss of U.S. citizenship. This is an area of law filled with nuance, exceptions, and real-world complexity. The most serious and dangerous scenario is serving in the military of a country that's hostile to the United States, especially if that service involves taking up arms against American forces. In such a case, the government may view the act as fundamentally incompatible with U.S. citizenship. But what about serving in the military of an allied nation? Over the years, many Americans have served in the armed forces of friendly countries without losing their citizenship. The law looks carefully at several factors. Was the country an enemy of the United States or a close partner? Did the person serve as an ordinary enlisted member, or did they become a commissioned officer? And most importantly, did they intend to give up their American citizenship by joining that foreign military? Once again, intent is the deciding factor. Without clear evidence that someone meant to abandon their American nationality, the government is unlikely to treat foreign military service alone as enough to take citizenship away. The fourth reason is accepting certain types of employment with a foreign government. At first, this sounds strange. Millions of Americans live and work overseas. So how could a simple job possibly threaten something as important as citizenship? The answer lies in the nature of the position and the intentions behind accepting it. Under U.S. law, there are two main categories of foreign government employment that can be considered potentially expatriating acts. The first involves accepting a position under the government of a foreign state when the person is also a national of that country, or when the position requires an oath of allegiance to that foreign government. The second involves taking a role that includes high-level policy-making responsibilities for a foreign government. A U.S. citizen working as a language teacher at a public university overseas or serving as a technical consultant is usually not at any real risk. The situations that attract serious scrutiny are very different. Imagine a U.S. citizen who becomes a cabinet minister in another country, or a senior diplomat, or a high-ranking official responsible for shaping the policies of a foreign government. In those cases, the U.S. government may question whether that person has effectively transferred their allegiance. The fifth reason for losing U.S. citizenship is the most direct and the most deliberate. It happens when a person formally renounces their American citizenship before a U.S. diplomatic or consular officer abroad. Unlike the other reasons we've discussed, this one is not about interpretation, context, or guessing someone's intent. This is a clear, intentional, and voluntary decision to stop being an American citizen. To renounce citizenship, a person must appear in person at a U.S. embassy or consulate outside the United States. They must sign official documents, take an oath of renunciation, and make an explicit statement that they no longer wish to be a U.S. citizen. Renouncing U.S. citizenship is usually permanent and irreversible. Once it's done, the individual loses the right to live in the United States as a citizen, the right to vote in American elections, and the protection of a U.S. passport. The sixth reason is one that very few people have ever heard about because it's rarely used in modern times. Under U.S. law, a person can renounce their citizenship while physically inside the United States during a time of war. Normally, renunciation must take place outside the country at a U.S. embassy or consulate, but Congress created a special exception for extraordinary circumstances. Even though the rule still exists on the books today, it's almost never invoked. Most Americans will go their entire lives without ever encountering a situation where this rule becomes relevant. The seventh and final reason is the most severe. A person can lose U.S. citizenship by committing treason, attempting to overthrow the U.S. government by force, or bearing arms against the United States. American citizenship is built on the idea of allegiance, loyalty, and shared commitment to the Constitution. When someone actively works to destroy the United States, wages war against it, or gives aid and comfort to its enemies, the law views that behavior as completely incompatible with remaining a citizen. It's important to emphasize that this category applies only to truly extreme conduct. Criticizing the government, protesting, disagreeing with policies, or engaging in ordinary political activism can never cost someone their citizenship. As we step back and look at all 7 reasons together, one powerful theme connects every single one of them. That theme is intent. More than any specific action, what truly determines whether someone loses U.S. citizenship is what was in their mind when they acted. This principle exists because of landmark Supreme Court decisions that fundamentally shaped modern American citizenship law. The court made it clear that citizenship is not just a government benefit that can be taken away at will. It's a constitutional right protected at the highest level. This framework provides an enormous amount of security to ordinary people. It means that U.S. citizenship cannot be lost by accident, by misunderstanding, or by a simple technical mistake. The system recognizes that modern life is global. Americans travel, work, study, and build lives all over the world. The law is designed to protect them, not to trap them. Let's talk about some common sense guidance that can help protect your citizenship. The first and most important piece of advice is simple. If you're ever considering an action that could fall into any of the 7 categories we discussed, get professional legal advice before you do anything. The second piece of practical advice is to always maintain visible, consistent ties to the United States. Keep your U.S. passport current and renew it on time. Continue filing U.S. tax returns even if you live abroad. Maintain bank accounts, property, or family connections in the United States whenever possible. Third, be extremely careful with any document, form, or oath that asks you to declare allegiance to another country. Read the language closely. Understand exactly what you're being asked to sign. Fourth, keep good records. If you ever find yourself in a situation where your intent might be questioned, documentation can make all the difference. The reality is that U.S. citizenship is one of the most secure legal statuses in the world. The laws we've talked about exist mainly to address rare and unusual situations, not to trap ordinary people. For the overwhelming majority of Americans, none of these 7 reasons will ever come close to affecting their lives. Understanding these rules should not make you fearful. Instead, it should make you more aware of how valuable and protected your citizenship really is. Knowledge replaces anxiety with confidence. U.S. citizenship is more than just a legal label. It's a relationship between you and a nation. It represents rights, freedoms, and opportunities that millions of people around the world dream of having. It also represents responsibilities to respect the Constitution, to follow the laws, and to remain loyal to the country that granted you that status. Thank you for spending this time with me today, and for caring enough to learn about a topic that affects your future. Keep asking questions, keep staying informed, and keep building the life you want in the United States. Until next time, take care of yourself, protect what you've earned, and thank you for being here.